Marcus checked his watch for the third time that morning, 7:42 a.m. He'd already been at the office for 12 minutes, and he knew without looking that there would be a message waiting for him. Victoria's messages came early. They always did. He settled into his desk chair, moved his mouse to wake up his computer, and sure enough, there it was. An email marked, "Urgent," in bold red letters, sent at 6:34 a.m. Victoria's signature style. Early enough that you knew she'd been thinking about it before she even got to the office, just important enough that it demanded immediate attention. Marcus, the email read, "Could you do me a favor? I need those Pemberton analytics redone. I know you finished them yesterday, but I'm thinking we should approach it differently. New angle. I'd like to see it by 10 a.m. I'm pitching to the client at 11, and this could really make a difference for the team." Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his chest. The Pemberton analytics. He'd spent all of Tuesday afternoon on those. He'd cross-referenced data, created visualizations, written explanatory notes, and sent them to Victoria at 4:47 p.m., just before he left to pick up his 7-year-old son, Devin, from aftercare. She'd thanked him in a reply at 9:15 p.m., he knew because he'd checked his email while helping Devin with his homework, something he told himself he should stop doing but never quite managed to stop. Now they needed to be redone. Different angle. By 10 a.m., he was good at his job. Better than good. He'd been at Henderson & Associates for 7 years, had moved up from junior analyst to senior analyst, had trained half the junior staff, and had consistently received praise for his attention to detail and his ability to turn complex data into compelling narratives. Victoria had specifically requested him as part of her team 4 years ago, and her reasoning had been clear: Marcus is the best analyst we have. I need the best. At the time, he'd felt pride swell in his chest. Someone noticed. Someone valued his work. Someone understood what he brought to the table. But lately, that pride had started to feel like something else. Marcus glanced at the digital clock on his computer, 7:44 a.m. Devin needed to be at school by 8:30, and Marcus had a ritual, a non-negotiable ritual, where they had breakfast together before school. It was their time. Devin would tell him about whatever book he was reading, or they'd talk about his upcoming science project, or sometimes they'd just sit in comfortable silence while Marcus mentally prepared for the day ahead and Devin ate his cereal while watching cartoons. It was the one thing Marcus had promised himself when Devin's mother, Sarah, had left 5 years ago. He would always be present. He would always show up. He wouldn't let his work, his ambition, or his circumstances turn him into a ghost in his own son's life. "Good morning, buddy," Marcus said, walking into the kitchen of their small 2-bedroom apartment. Devin was already up, his brown hair still tousled from sleep, standing on his tiptoes to reach the cereal cabinet. "Dad, can you get the Honey Nut Cheerios? I can't reach, and regular Cheerios are boring," Devin said, his 7-year-old logic irrefutable. Marcus smiled despite the weight of the morning. He reached up, grabbed the box, and poured a bowl for his son. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the soft clink of the cereal hitting the bowl. This was his favorite part of every day, these few minutes before everything got loud and complicated. "You know what today is?" Devin asked, his mouth already half full of cereal. "What, bud?" "It's the day we get to see my science project displayed in the hallway. Mr. Patterson is putting them all up today, and he said mine might be featured on the bulletin board because it was exceptionally well researched." That's what he said, exceptionally well researched. Marcus felt something warm in his chest. Devin had spent 3 weeks on that project, an exploration of how different plants grew under different light conditions. Marcus had helped him set it up, had driven to 3 different stores to find the right soil and the right pots, had taken photos of the plants every 3 days so they could document the progress. They'd worked on it together in the evenings, and it had been one of the most satisfying things Marcus had done in a long time. Not because the project was impressive, though it was, but because Devin's face had lit up every single time they discovered something new. "That's incredible, Devin. I'm really proud of you. And Mr. Patterson's right. You did an exceptionally well-researched project," Marcus said, reaching over to ruffle his son's already messy hair. "Dad, you're messing it up," Devin protested, but he was grinning. "Better?" Marcus asked, making it somehow worse. No, now I look like I got struck by lightning. Lightning gives you style, Marcus said, and Devin rolled his eyes the way only a 7-year-old who thinks he's much older can. They finished breakfast at 8:12, which gave them 18 minutes to get Devin to school. It was tight, but it was doable. Marcus drove his 2008 Honda Civic, the same car he'd had for 9 years, the one that had just barely passed its last inspection and made a concerning grinding noise when it rained, and the morning traffic was, miraculously, light. He pulled up to the school at 8:28, gave Devin a kiss on the forehead, and watched him run up to the entrance with his backpack bouncing on his small shoulders. That was when his phone buzzed. Another email from Victoria. Actually, can you get me those analytics by 9:30 instead? I realized I have a call at 9:45 with the client and I'd love to show them the new approach. Thanks. 9:30. That gave him an hour and 46 minutes to completely redo the work he'd spent 6 hours on yesterday. The drive back downtown would take 23 minutes. That left him with approximately 80 minutes to do the work. He could do it. It would be tight. It would require him to skip his usual morning routine, the coffee he got from the cafe on the corner, the 15 minutes he usually spent catching up on industry news, the moment of peace before the chaos of the day began. But it was doable. Marcus drove back to the office, already mentally reorganizing the data, already thinking about what new angle Victoria might want. She hadn't specified what she was looking for, which was typical. Victoria had a way of asking for things in broad strokes and expecting people to read her mind about the specifics. It was a quality that made her difficult to work for, but she was talented enough and powerful enough that people accommodated it. He arrived back at the office at 8:52 a.m., made himself a cup of coffee from the break room, not the good coffee, just the bitter office blend, and settled into his desk to start over. The thing about redoing work you've already done is that it's not just about the time investment. It's about the mental reorientation. You have to let go of what you created and approach it fresh, even though your brain keeps trying to go back to the original version because that version has already been vetted, already been perfected in your mind. Marcus worked steadily. His fingers flew across the keyboard. He pulled new data sets. He created different visualizations. He wrote new explanatory text. He was good at context switching, at understanding what clients wanted even when they didn't say it explicitly. He'd developed this skill over years of working with Victoria, of learning to read between the lines of her requests. At 9:04 a.m., he had a moment of doubt. What if this wasn't what she wanted? What if he'd misread the assignment and gone in a completely different direction? But he pushed the doubt aside and kept working. At 9:26 a.m., he sent the analytics to Victoria's email with a message, "New approach attached. Ready to present if you'd like to walk through it before the client call." Then he sat back in his chair and took his first real breath of the morning. His computer screen showed the time, 9:27 a.m. He'd done it, not gracefully, not with any time to spare, but he'd done it. He opened Slack to check if there were any other urgent messages. There were always other urgent messages, and started looking through the requests that had come in while he was focused on the analytics. 3 items flagged as high priority. 2 of them could wait. One was from James in the marketing department asking for data formatting help, which was technically not Marcus's responsibility, but James always asked him because Marcus's work was better than the official data team's work. Marcus was going to say no. He was going to tell James that he needed to go through the proper channels. He was going to set a boundary. Instead, he replied, "Send me what you need and I'll take a look when I get a chance." Because that's what Marcus did. He said yes. He was the person you went to when you needed something done right. He was the reliable one. The one who could be depended on. He was starting to realize, the person who couldn't say no. Victoria replied to his analytics email at 9:41 a.m. "Perfect. This is exactly what I needed. You're a lifesaver, Marcus. Seriously, I don't know what I'd do without you." He felt the familiar warmth of that praise, even as something deeper in him, something he was learning to recognize, whispered that he should probably be concerned about being this indispensable. Wasn't there something unhealthy about that? Wasn't there something in the way she always seemed to need him, always seemed to ask just a little more, always seemed to assume he'd be available? But the praise felt good. And Victoria was his boss. And saying no to your boss was complicated. The day went on. After the client call at 9:45, which went well, Victoria sent him a thumbs up emoji. There was a departmental meeting where Victoria praised the analytics he'd redone. Marcus really crushed this one, she'd said in front of the entire team, and several people had turned to look at him, nodding their approval. He'd felt seen, valued, important. Then, at 3:15 p.m., Victoria appeared at his desk. "Hey, do you have a minute?" she asked. She was dressed in her power outfit, a navy blazer with perfectly tailored lines, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek bun. Victoria was a striking woman in her mid-40s, sharp-eyed and sharp-tongued. She'd built a reputation as someone who got results, and people either loved her or were intimidated by her. Usually both. "Of course," Marcus said, minimizing the spreadsheet he was working on. James's data formatting request. He'd told himself he'd get to it after lunch, and it was now afternoon, and there was still so much to do. "I have a favor to ask," Victoria said, and Marcus felt that tightness return to his chest. In his experience, conversations that started with, "I have a favor to ask," rarely ended well. They ended with you committed to something you hadn't fully understood, obligated in ways you hadn't anticipated. "Sure, what do you need?" he said, because what else could he say? Victoria leaned against his desk. She never sat in the guest chair when she came to his desk, always maintained that standing position that made her taller than him even though he was technically in the seated position of authority. "The Castellano account. You know how important it is, right? Biggest client we've had in 3 years. Projected revenue for the full contract is $2.8 million. Marcus nodded. Everyone knew about the Castellano account. It was the account Victoria had been chasing for 6 months. It represented a significant growth opportunity for the firm, and if she managed it well, it would be a career-defining achievement. "I need someone I can really trust on this," Victoria continued. "Someone who understands the complexities of the data, someone who can communicate it clearly to the client, someone who isn't going to let me down." "Okay," Marcus said slowly, trying to figure out where this was going. "I want you to be the lead analyst on this account. I know it's a lot of additional work on top of what you're already doing, but I genuinely don't think anyone else can handle it the way I need it handled. And I'll make sure you're compensated for the extra effort. Maybe a bonus at the end of the contract, or, I don't know, we can figure out the details. But I really need you on this, Marcus." On the surface, this was a compliment. It was an opportunity. It was a vote of confidence. It was everything that ambitious junior employees dreamed of: expanded responsibility, an important account, the chance to demonstrate their value. But Marcus had learned, in the past 4 years, to listen to the underneath of things. And underneath this offer was something that sounded like, "I need you to do more for me. I need you to take on additional work that will require you to stay later, to be more stressed, to be more available. And I'm going to make it sound like an opportunity so you can't refuse without looking ungrateful." "How much additional work are we talking about?" Marcus asked carefully. "Hard to say until we really dive into it, but probably another 20 or 30 hours a week. Maybe more in the beginning. But once we get the system set up, it should stabilize," Victoria said, and Marcus's mind immediately did the math. His current job was already 45 hours a week, often stretching to 50 when deadlines hit. Adding 30 hours would bring him to 75 to 80 hours a week. 75 to 80 hours a week meant less time with Devon. It meant skipping their dinner routine on some nights, pushing his son's bedtime back, explaining why Daddy was too tired to help with homework. It meant becoming the kind of father he'd promised himself he would never be. "Can I think about it?" Marcus asked. Victoria's expression shifted slightly, just a fraction of a second, but it was enough. She wasn't used to being asked to wait. She wasn't used to people needing time to consider her requests. "Of course," she said, but her tone had cooled just perceptibly. "But I'd like to know soon. The project kicks off next week, and I want to get everything moving quickly." She walked back to her office, and Marcus sat at his desk, staring at his computer screen without really seeing it. He already knew what he was going to say yes to. He knew because he always said yes. He knew because he'd been saying yes for so long that he'd forgotten it was an option to say anything else. But for the first time, he also knew that something had to change. That evening, Marcus picked up Devon from aftercare at 5:47 p.m. Later than he liked, because he'd stayed at the office trying to get ahead on work before committing to the Castellano account. "Dad, you're late," Devon said, not accusatory, just matter of fact. 7-year-olds had a way of stating truths without judgment. "I know, buddy, I'm sorry. I had to finish something at work," Marcus said, and Devon nodded as if this explained everything. And in a way, it did. Daddy was busy at work. That was normal. That was just how things were. They stopped at the grocery store to pick up ingredients for dinner. Devon wanted to help cook, so they made spaghetti together, with Devon standing on a step stool at the counter, and Marcus guiding his small hands as he carefully stirred the sauce. It was therapeutic in a way that Marcus needed more of, this simple act of creating something together, of being present, of giving Devon his full attention. After dinner, they sat on the couch and Devon talked about his science project finally being displayed in the hallway. Mr. Patterson said it was the best in the class. Better than Tommy's project, and Tommy's project was really cool too, but mine was better because I actually tracked the data correctly. Marcus listened and asked questions and felt his heart expand with pride for his son. This kid, this incredible, curious, brilliant kid was depending on him to be present, to be there, to show up as a father who had his priorities straight. And that night, after Devon was asleep, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and thought about what he was going to say to Victoria. He thought about it all night. He thought about it while lying in bed, unable to sleep. He thought about it during his morning run at 6 a.m., pushing his body harder than usual, trying to exhaust some of the tension that had taken up residence in his shoulders. He thought about it while making breakfast with Devon, while dropping him at school, while driving back to the office. And at 9:30 a.m., sitting at his desk with a fresh cup of coffee, he opened an email to Victoria and started to type. Then he stopped. Then he deleted what he'd written. Then he picked up his phone and called her instead. "Hey," Victoria answered on the second ring. "What's up?" "I've been thinking about the Castellano account," Marcus said, and his voice sounded strange to his own ears. Strained, like he was asking for something that terrified him. "Great. Are you in?" Victoria said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. She already knew what he was going to say. Of course she did. She'd already counted on him saying yes. "I appreciate the opportunity. I really do," Marcus began, and he heard himself say the next words almost as if someone else was speaking. "But I can't take it on. Not with the additional 30 hours a week. It's too much right now." Silence. A long silence. The kind of silence that tells you that the other person is shocked, and not pleasantly. "Oh," Victoria said finally. I'm surprised to hear that. I thought this was something you'd be excited about." "I am excited about it, professionally," Marcus said, and the lie sat oddly in his mouth. Was it a lie? He tried to examine his own feelings. "But personally, I just can't do it right now. It's not feasible." "Is everything okay?" Victoria asked, and there was something almost patronizing in the question, as if she was checking in on a child who'd said something unexpected. "Everything's fine. I just have commitments outside of work that I can't compromise on." "Devon," Victoria said, and it wasn't a question. "Yes," Marcus said. "Devon, I understand," Victoria said, and she sounded like she did, but she also sounded disappointed in a way that made Marcus feel like he'd let her down. "Well, I wish you'd reconsider, but I respect that. Let me see if I can find someone else." But Marcus could hear what she wasn't saying. "I was counting on you. You're letting me down. I thought you were different. I thought you understood what it meant to commit to something important." The conversation ended, and Marcus sat at his desk feeling like he'd climbed a mountain and also like he'd done something wrong. Over the next week, something shifted at work. Victoria was still professional, still polite, but there was a coolness to her interactions that hadn't been there before. The little touches, the "you're a lifesaver," the thumbs-up emojis, the way she'd mentioned him in meetings, those started to diminish. And then, a new pattern emerged. On Monday, Victoria asked if he could send her the analytics for the Jensen account before he left for the day. Just a small favor. Just a routine report that normally took an hour. On Tuesday, she asked if he could attend a client meeting at 7 p.m. that evening to take notes. Just a small favor. The meeting wasn't on his calendar originally, but her actual note-taker had an emergency, and she needed someone she could trust. On Wednesday, she asked if he could help James in marketing reorganize data for a presentation, even though the data department should have been handling it. Just a small favor. She knew he was good with data and she really needed his help. By Friday, Marcus was